Okay, so welcome everyone to Intro to Google Analytics. Today we're going to talk about how to set up Google Analytics. So we're going to be covering the basics. So we're going to also go over the different Google Analytics reports, and I'm going to talk about some key questions that Google Analytics can answer for you. My name is Nicole McCullum. I am a digital marketing instructor at Noble Desktop, where we offer a certificate in digital marketing. The first is digital strategy. We also offer Google Analytics, Google Ads, search engine optimization, and social media that includes Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn marketing. I also run a web design and internet marketing business. I've been doing that for the past 13 years. And I'm also a foodie. I love to eat and I love to cook. Um, Although I wouldn't say I'm an expert at that. So that's a little bit about me. So we're going to dive right in. So what is web analytics? So web analytics is the measurement, collection, analysis, and reporting of web data for the purpose of understanding and optimizing website performance. So I know that's a lot of information packed in there. So think about this. We spend a lot of time, money, and effort driving traffic to our website, right? Web analytics helps us to better understand how that traffic, in terms of our users, interact with our website and really identify opportunities for improvement that impacts our bottom line. So, for example, without having some sort of web analytics set up on your site, you would not be able to tell specifically where are your visitors coming from, or where the people who actually take meaningful actions on your site, where are those people coming from, and what are their behavior, right? So these are some of the things that analytics can tell us. So Google Analytics is a free tool within the Google marketing platform that collects the data and compiles it into useful reports. So within within the Google marketing platform, you have Google Ads, you have things like Google Data Studio, you have a suite of tools. So Google Analytics is just one of many tools that you can integrate into your website for the purpose of tracking your website activity. So why Google Analytics? So John Wanamaker, who is considered one of the pioneers of marketing, he was an American merchant. He said, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half, right? And many marketers, many website owners, business owners, sometimes are left scratching their head because they throw things at the wall and they can't really measure what is actually working and what is not working. And that's where analytics play a key role, whether you want to measure your online marketing efforts or whether you want to measure your offline marketing efforts. Analytics can help you to better understand what's working for you so that you can continue to make better marketing decisions. It also can help you identify problems on your website. So through the behavior flow reports, for example, you can see where people might be getting stuck on your website or where there might be specific issues that people might be having on your website. It also helps you to measure the entire customer experience from the time they enter your site to the time they leave, right? And everything in between. What pages do they navigate to? The people that actually make a purchase, what is their typical flow through your site? What are some of the pages that the people that actually make a purchase have in common, right? So you can look at different segments of your website visitors so that you can better understand their behavior. It also helps you to discover where along the journey you're losing customers. Where are people falling off as they go through the checkout process, for example, is one of the key questions you might want to answer. So these are some of the reasons that analytics can benefit your business if you're not already leveraging it, whether for yourself as a business owner or whether you're in a marketing team. So how does Google Analytics work? So Google Analytics does three things. You need to first set up, collect the data. then it stores the data, and then it reports on the data. So in order for you to use Google Analytics, you need to install a tracking code, which I'm going to walk you through how you get that code. You need to install tracking code onto each page of your website. And then every time a user visits a page, the tracking code will collect anonymous information about how the user interacted with that page. So when someone visits your site, their browser is cookied anonymously, right? And then that information is stored in a database. That once that data is stored in a database, it is then accessible via reports inside the Google Analytics dashboard, right? And there are several reports inside the Google Analytics dashboard that can give you, for example, information on what time of the day are people more likely to convert or come to my site, for example, or what day of the week does people typically visit my site the most. So these are some of the things that you can access within the Google Analytics reports once you have configured and set up Google Analytics successfully. So getting started with Google Analytics. First, you need to go to google.com/analytics, and you need to have a Google login. So you need to have either a Gmail account, or you need to have set up your professional email on Google as a user. I would advise you, if you're already using other Google products, like for example, if you're using Google Ads, or you're using Google My Business, or Google Data Studio, or Google Search Console, that you use the same email address that you use to access other Google products, like for example, Google Drive. You want to use the same email address to set up all your Google accounts, because that it will make it easy for you to link between accounts, and it will just make it easier for you to manage. So once you go to google.com/analytics, it's going to ask you to sign in. Again, because you need to have a Google login. So you can either click sign in, or you can click start for free. And it's going to bring you through this setup where you are going to be able to start by entering your account name. So your account name can be the name of your company, right? Within Google Analytics, once under one user account, you can have up to 100 accounts within that. And how is that useful? Of course, if you're a business and it's just one business that you have, that's not that meaningful to you. But if you're, let's say, a large organization, you have several different websites, or seven different business entities, then it becomes useful to you. If you are, for example, an agency, or you plan to offer Google services, you might also be managing accounts for your clients. And so that becomes very useful to you, so that you can keep everything under one login. Okay, so once you start the process, it's going to ask you whether you want to check these boxes: Google products and services, so that you can share your Google Analytics data with Google, so that they can improve your products. I generally check this box as well. Benchmarking. So it allows you to contribute anonymous data to Google, so that they can see basically for your industry, how do you stack up against other websites in your industry. And if you check this, then you will be able to access a benchmarking report that you can compare how your site is doing to similar sites in your industry within Google reports. So I would encourage you to also keep that box checked. And then technical support and account specialist is if you want to get technical support from Google for one reason or another, and you want an account specialist to be able to access your site, then you will need to check those boxes as well. So I encourage you to ensure that these boxes are checked, and then you would click next to continue. I'm just making sure anybody has questions. Okay, good. All right, so So then it will ask you to select what you would like to measure. So you can either measure a website, you can measure an app, or you can measure both at the same time. For the purpose of this, we focus primarily on measuring a website, but if you have an app, you can select that option as well. Now, if you have an app, there's going to be an additional step that you will need to take if you have an iOS or an Android. You would need what is called the Google Software Development Kit. And you can just Google Analytics Software Development Kit, and you can get some more information on that. And it gives you the details of what you need to do if you have an app that you'd like to set up to track. Then once you get past that, it will bring you where you would enter your website name. So you can basically, again, enter your company name or your website name. Now, one thing I want you to pay attention to that can really affect your data is to make sure you select the correct protocol for your website. So most of us by now have an HTTPS protocol, which means that we have an SSL certificate set up onto our website. If you don't have an SSL certificate set up on your website as yet, then you want to leave it on HTTP. But if you have an SSL certificate set up on your website, then you want to click down into this and select HTTPS. Now, if you don't set this to the correct protocol, you're going to see your data is not going to be very accurate, because HTTP and HTTPS are essentially two versions of your website. Okay, so it's very important for you to select the right protocol when setting that up. Also, reporting time zone. So I'm sorry, I skipped industry. So you can select your industry here. As you click down, if you don't see a specific industry for you, you want to select the one that's closest or more representative of your industry. Now, this goes again back to the benchmarking report that you're going to be able to pull. Then something that's also very important is selecting the right reporting time zone. This automatically defaults to Los Angeles time because Google is on the West Coast. But if, for example, you're on the East Coast, you want to change this to Eastern time or New York time, or if you're on Central time, you want to change that. And then you will click create, and it's going to ask you to accept the terms and conditions. So you can generally, if you are someone that likes to get into the weeds and read your terms and conditions, you can go over it and make sure that you're okay with it. But for most of us, we'll just check it because we can't really change Google's terms and conditions, right? So you check those two boxes, and you will need to accept that. Now, also, one of the things I want to tell you, which most small businesses, I think, neglect, is that you are going to need to have a privacy policy on your site. A privacy policy basically lets your users know what information you collect from them when they land on your site. So when you install Google Tracking, it does collect some information, even though the information is anonymized, right? So you need to let people know what information, and you can just Google online for a standard, privacy policy. If you're a small business, that should be enough, but you can also just reach out to your attorney and ask them, about creating a privacy policy on your site. So this is something that all websites need to have, especially with GDPR, which was implemented in the UK. If you have people visiting your site, especially from the UK, you need to have that on your website. So I would encourage you to ensure that that is on your site. Once you get past that, it will take you to the tracking code. So this is your tracking code, and you also have a tracking ID. So if you are installing it on your site, you can just copy this code and make sure that it's pasted on every page on your website that you would like to track. Now, if your site is in, let's say, like a WordPress, for example, All you would need to do is copy this tracking ID. You won't need to have any code that you would need to install. So I'm going to talk about that shortly. Just if you want to access, your tracking code at a later date, let's say you're doing a website redesign and you need to move the tracking code over to your new website, you would just need to go back into your admin in Google, and then go under property, go under tracking info, and then tracking code, and you will be able to access the code that was created for you when you initially set up the code. So this is the code and this is the tracking ID. I'm blocking this tracking ID because this tracking ID is unique to each website. And people who are unscrupulous sometimes do copy your code and use it on their website, which can actually screw your data, right? So that's something I want you to be aware of. The other thing is if you have a WordPress site or if you have a Wix website or a Squarespace site, for example, you just need the tracking ID to install it. You don't need to physically have the code installed. I just want to walk you through the WordPress because most people tend to have a WordPress site. So if you have a WordPress site, there's a plugin called Monster Insights that you can install on your WordPress. That makes it very easy for you to install this code. So basically just log into WordPress, go onto your plugins, click add new, search for Monster Insights, and then you will install and activate this plugin. And once you do that, you're going to be able to enter that tracking ID that I referenced earlier. And really, it's as simple as that for installing the tracking code on your website. Any questions? Yes, you can go back in and edit your settings if you had your Analytics account for a while. So you would just go into your into your account and then go into your account settings. Yes, in Wix, there is an analytics section that you will be able to add that tracking code as well. I'm sorry, not the tracking code, the tracking ID. Okay, and then the next thing that you want to do is you want to verify that your site is being tracked. So if you go back into your admin and you go to property and you go to tracking info and tracking code, in the top right here, you'll see it says receiving traffic in the past 48 hours. So that is one way for you to be able to confirm that you in fact installed your tracking code properly and it is reporting in Google Analytics. You can also click the send test traffic and it will tell you again whether or not you're receiving traffic as well. So this is one way to verify that your site is being tracked. Another way for you to verify that the site is being tracked is to install something called the Google Tag Assistant. And the Google Tag Assistant is a free plugin for Chrome that allows you to install it on your Chrome browser and once you turn it on, let's see if I can get this here for you. Once you turn it on, I hope you can see the screen. Once you turn it on, it's going to be able to tell you what tracking IDs are installed. So I'm on the oprahmag.com site. If I click into my Google Tag Assistant that I have installed on my Chrome browser, you see it shows me the tracking ID. And this one could be like an older Google Analytics code. There's some sort of error in there. But again, it lets you know whether or not your Google Analytics install and if you have error with your Google Analytics tracking as well. So those are two ways that you can verify that your tracking code is in fact tracking properly. No, David, you do not need to have two IDs. when you say a website that's linked, can you clarify that for me? Do you mean two separate websites or? Okay, I'll come back to that because I was waiting for you to respond, David. Okay, so any questions before I move on to some of the important Google Analytics configurations? Do you own both? Do you own both of those? It really depends. If you own both of those sites, for example, yeah. So it really depends. There's something called cross-domain tracking, where you can track traffic that comes across from another website into your main website. It really depends on how the two are set up. So I'm not really familiar with GoDaddy's website platform, but most of the template platforms out there, like Wix, Square, they do have that built-in feature for you to add your Google Analytics tracking ID. There's a section on the site, so I would just ask GoDaddy customer support. How do you change from HTTP to HTTPS? So you would have to purchase an SSL certificate from your hosting company, and then you would have to change your files from an HTTP to HTTPS. Usually, that's something that your web developer would do because it's pretty technical. But the first step is purchasing your SSL certificate through your hosting company, your secure socket layer certificate. Most hosts have a certificate, but you have to install it, especially if you already have a website that has been built for a while. I think like if you purchase your site through Wix or Squarespace, it might already be built in. But for example, if you're doing a complete custom website, you most likely have to purchase that SSL certificate separately. Okay. So in order for you to get the full use of Google Analytics, and that's what GA stands for, Google Analytics, so I might refer to that abbreviation, it requires additional configurations. So for example, and these are just a small example of configurations, during the Google Analytics class that I teach, we spend a lot of time on all the configurations that you need to do in order for you to get the data that you need to make your Google Analytics really effective, right? I'm just touching on some of them right now. So you need to set up conversion tracking. And conversion tracking is about really the actions that people are taking on your site. So you want to make sure that people are taking specific actions on your site. I'm going to talk more about that. You need to customize views, right? Or you generally at the very basic level, you have two views. And views are basically subsets of your Google Analytics data that you might want to isolate certain or exclude certain data from your report. So for example, you might want to have a view with all visitors, and then you might want to have a view where you're filtering out certain types of traffic, like bot traffic, for example, right? So view are basically your customized view of what data you want entered into your reports. Campaign tracking. So campaign tracking is really about tracking your marketing efforts, right? If you are running online campaigns, so for example, Facebook ads, you want to make sure that that traffic is accurately registered in Google Analytics. So for example, another example is your email traffic. When you run your email campaigns, if you do not set up campaign tracking for your email traffic, it's all going to go into the channel direct, right? The channel is a high level category of your traffic. And I'm going to show you an example of that shortly. So for example, whenever you send an email campaign, you need to make sure that you have campaign tracking set up, because it wouldn't show you that this traffic came specifically from email and these maybe sales or conversions or leads that you got came specifically from email. So campaign tracking helps you to successfully tag your online ad campaigns and traffic, so you can accurately attribute where that traffic came from. Content grouping. So content grouping allows you to group sections of your website pages into specific categories of content. So for example, let's say you have a blog and you blog about different topics. You can group a specific section of your blog into a content group so that you can analyze just that topic, for example. Another common reason that people might want to do content grouping is like, if you have a lot of different people blogging on your website, you might want to group your content based upon authors. So you can see, well, how does one author content perform compared to another? For like, let's say a more transactional website, you might want to group, if you sell shoes and you sell coats, you might want to group your shoes into one group and your coats into one group, so you can compare how those different type of content perform, or different type of services that you might provide. You might group, for example, Noble Desktop does coding, they do business courses. So for example, they can group their coding content into one content group, and then they can group their business content into one content group, so that they'll be able to better analyze and better compare how that traffic is performing. And then e-commerce. If you have an e-commerce site, Google Analytics will not track your e-commerce traffic outside the box. You have to take the extra step to configure this e-commerce tracking. So there's two steps. There's your basic e-commerce tracking, and then there's something called enhanced e-commerce tracking, which is a little bit gives you more data. Some people say you need to do both of them, and some people say it really depends on what you need. And again, when we teach the Google Analytics class, I go through the difference between the two types of e-commerce tracking and what you get from each one of those. I just don't have the time to go into the details of that right now. Shopify, it should be built into Shopify as well, yes. I'll take a sip of water. Okay, so the next thing that brings me to is conversion tracking. So I talked about in order for you to get full use of Google Analytics, there are additional configurations that you need to make. One of those configurations is conversion tracking. At the very basic level, this is something that you should be doing, because without this, you're not really going to be able to understand how well your website is performing. So conversion tracking. So what is a conversion? So conversion is the completion of a goal. So essentially, it's the completion of an action that you want someone to take on your website, right? So what is a goal? So a goal is a desired action that you would like visitors to take. So for example, signing up for an email, filling out a contact form, downloading a report, visiting a specific page on your site, making a booking or completing a purchase. These are all examples of goals that you might have for your site. So when you signed up for this class, for example, you entered your email address. Now, that was one of the goals, right? To get you to sign up for this class. Now, without setting up conversion tracking, Noble Desktop will not be able to tell, well, based upon the number of traffic that was sent to that page, what percentage of that traffic actually took action and what percentage didn't, right? So they wouldn't be able to compare, for example, how does signing up for the Google Analytics course compare to signing up for the website fundamentals course, right? Which one performed better? So it's really essential for you to set up conversion tracking for the different goals that you're asking people to complete on your site, so you can have a better idea of how you're performing, whether you're performing below average or above average, right? So the goals that you have on your site is going to vary depending on the type of website that you have. So for example, if you have an e-commerce site, well, one of your top goals is how many people are completing the purchase, right? How many people are making purchases? If you have a lead generation site, like a purely information-based website, your goal is to collect leads. So for example, that might be how many people filled out my request a quote form, or how many people filled out my schedule an appointment, right? If you're a content publisher, meaning you have a media site or you have a blog, for example, your goal is to measure engagement. So it might be things like how many pages a user views on average, for example, or how much time do they spend on site, right? If you're just an online platform, your goal is to help customers find information, right? And if you are a branding site, then your goal is to measure awareness engagement. So you might look to see things like, again, how often are people searching for our company name, for example, right? As a measure of awareness. So how can Noble Desktop track which visits came from email marketing? So you have to, for Google search, that is already going to be built in. However, for email marketing, you have to set up what's called campaign tracking, and that is done with something called UTM parameters. Second goal would be having the people who signed up is actually in the class, maybe. I say this because in previous seminars, I received a reminder to log in, and which did not happen this time. Actually, you're probably going to see it after you got out of this webinar, because as our CEO was on earlier, and he said there was a delay in the email going out. So it was not going out as quickly as possible. It could be an issue with the email provider. So why do you need to set up goals? So Google Analytics doesn't automatically track actions on your site. So without setting up goals, you're just going to be able to see how many visits your site get, but you wouldn't be able to tell like which source of traffic is driving the most sales for me, for example, right? Without setting up a goal for tracking your online purchases. Why is that missing? So you will also be able to discover if your website has issues. So let's say that there's a page that's not loading properly on your site. You will be able to see that based upon setting up your goals. Also, you'll be able to discover if your marketing is paying off. So in Google Analytics, there are 5 types of goals that you can set up. The first is a destination goal, and this is typically a page that a visitor lands on after taking an action. So for example, when you sign up for this webinar, when you entered your email, it took you to what is called a thank you page, right? So you would want to track the thank you page as a goal, because the only way for people to get to that page is for them to first enter their email to sign up for the class. So destination goal means the page that people land on after they took a specific action. So after they signed up for a class, after they made a purchase, they go to the order confirmation page. So you would track the order confirmation page or the destination page as a goal. You can set a duration goal. So a duration goal is the amount of time that visitors stay on your site. So for example, you can say, I want to, if people stay more than 5 minutes on my site, they have achieved a goal, my goal, right? Or maybe they're more likely to buy if they spend at least 5 minutes on your site. Pages or screens per session. So you can also track the number of pages a visitor views before leaving. So you can say, well, if a user views at least 3 pages on my site, that is a goal. You can also track events. So you can track button clicks or video plays. So David was asking earlier about links from 2 different sites. So generally, if you have links on your website that's going to another website, you can't really see, the traffic for that other website once that person clicks that link. But what you can do is you can set up event tracking in Google Analytics that lets you know how many times that specific link is being clicked, right? So you know people are clicking that link and therefore going to that site. Or you can track things like video plays, like how many times people play the video on your site. Now, the reason why these are considered events is because they are within a page. They do not require the page to load, right? So that's why you want to track it as an event, because they're not page loads. And then you have SMART goals. SMART goals are really typical for if you're running Google Ads campaign and you don't have conversions tracking set up. It basically uses behavioral and contextual data to predict which sessions will result in a conversion. So generally, this is automatically configured within your account if you are running Google Ad campaigns. Yes, so goals are something that you can set up in Google Analytics. No, you don't get an email that the goal has been met. You will have to so you wouldn't get an automatic email that the goal has been met. You can set up reports to be emailed to you. So for example, you can set it up where you get a conversion report emailed to you from Google Analytics, either, on a daily basis or, a weekly basis, however often you want it. But it's not going to be automatically emailed to you unless you set that up in Google Analytics. And that's something we do cover also in the full day Google Analytics class. Okay, so in order for you to set up a goal in Google Analytics, you basically would need to log in to Google Analytics. And then you go to the admin section, and I'm going to walk you through that. Okay, so in Google Analytics, this is your admin section. This little gear icon is your admin section. And you need to be within your view column. And in your view column, you will see goals. This is where you're able to set up goals. There are some template goals for like revenue, acquisition, inquiry, and engagement. But I tend to just set up a custom goal. So you would select custom, and then you would click continue, and then you would give your goal a name. So for example, I can say email newsletter sign up, for example. Actually, I'm just going to say GA webinar sign up, since I'm going to use that as an example, right? The goal slot ID basically lets you know how you in Google Analytics, you get up to 20 goals per view. So that's what these goal slot IDs are. It counts how many goals you have.
Hey, Nicole, can you share your screen?
Oh, I'm sorry. I swear that every time you have to do a new share. Okay, so and sorry about that. In the bottom left of your Google Analytics interface is the admin. This gear icon is the admin. And again, you under the view column in your admin, you would go to goals. And then the first thing is to name your goal. So as I said, you get up to 20 goals per view. And that's what this goal slot ID represents, how many goals you've already added. And then, as I said before, you can set up 5 types of goals in Google Analytics. The SMART goal is automatically set up if you have Google Ads running. But you can set up a destination goal, a duration goal, a pages goal, an event goal. So to set up a destination goal, because I'm going to do this example, this is one of the most common type of goals that you can set up. You would select destination, and then you would click continue. And then you would want to add the page here that the person lands on after they take the action. So I have, for example, this Google Analytics webinar sign up. So you would not put this page as your goal, right? You would put the page that they land on after they complete the goal. So basically what I would do is I would just copy everything after the slash, and I would use that as my goal for the page. The reason you want to do that is you want, for example, when you can search your pages in Google Analytics, so you can search for specific pages. So you want to just use the URL path and not your domain in here. And you can choose equals to, begins with, or regular expression. I generally leave it to equals to. The reason why is if I put begins with, for example, you have seminars in here, and Noble Desktop is using this for all their seminars pages. So I may not want to do that. So I generally would put equals to. Now, one of the things though that Noble Desktop is doing, they're probably using the same thank you page for all the seminar sign up, and I would probably just want to do one for the specific type of seminar, so I can better understand how people are converting for each one of the seminars, right? Now, you can add a value. This is optional. I don't want to go into this too much because it's more advanced. You can also add a funnel, basically the steps that people have to go through. So we know that the first thing is that they have to enter the GA webinar landing page, right? So basically what I would do is add this page as a first step that they need to. And this is important because, for example, when you look at your conversions and you look at how people are flowing through your site, you can see the exact paths they take and where they left your funnel, for example. And you would just turn this on as required, right? Because they have to visit this page before they meet the goal. Now, if I was in my Noble account, I can click verify this goal and it will let you know whether this goal happened within the last 7 days. And then I would save it and I would have my goal, my goal set up to track that specific action, right? Now, again, this is just an example for Noble Desktop. You have to identify the goal as it specifically relates to your website. Any questions on this? What if your goal is not on the same site domain? Again, this is where you might want to set up something like cross-domain tracking. No, if you spend extra money a month on G Suite, you don't get anything extra with Google Analytics. Jackson, sorry about that, about my screen share. I hope you're able to see. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to do an overview of the Google Analytics interface, right? So once your Google Analytics is set up, you are thrown into the Google Analytics interface. So at the very top, you have the Google Analytics account selector. So this is the account selector. If you have more than one Google Analytics account, you can navigate between those accounts so that you can select which account you would like to view. On the left hand here is your report. So you have your real-time report. This shows you what's happening in real time on your website. So this can be helpful when you're doing tests. It can also be helpful if you're running a special promotion and you want to see like how your traffic is flowing in real time. So this is basically what's happening now. Below the real-time report, you have the four main reports. You have the audience report, the acquisition report, behavior report, and conversions report. These are referred to as the standard reports in Google Analytics, right? Or historical reports. Your audience report is where you can see questions like, what is the age of my visitors, right? This tells you, your audience report tells you about the people who visit your site. Your acquisition report tells you, where does your website visitors come from, right? So this is where you'll see whether you had email traffic or Google traffic or social media traffic. That's where you're going to see that. Your behavior report tells you about the behavior of your website visitors, like what pages did they visit on my site, how much time did they spend on my site, what are the top pages on my site. And your conversion report tells you about what actions are people taking on my site, right? So once you go into these reports, you have access to a whole suite of reports within these reports. And then again, the admin is where you'll be able to access all your admin settings, which I went into the admin briefly for you to show you how to set up your goals. Then at the top right here, you have the date range. You can change this date range to reflect any time frame from the time that you set up your Google Analytics account. So when you change the time frame, you'll be able to see data just for that time frame that you selected. At the top here, the bell, you have the alert. This lets you know if you have any issues with your account, for example, right? This 4 square dots here lets you navigate between the Google marketing platforms. So you can access your Google, your Google Data Studio, for example, Google Ads. So you can navigate between those Google Products accounts. The question mark is if you have questions, you'll be able to search articles and see the answers. These 3 dots lets you send feedback directly to Google. And then this persona icon here lets you switch between different Google accounts that you might have. Okay, so I'm just gonna go back 1 second. Let me do a new share. I'm gonna go back here. And I just want to show you, like once you click into the audience report, there's a whole suite of reports within the audience reports that you can access, like what technology people are using, where people are located, benchmarking I talked about, like how do you stack up to your competitors, how are you performing, and then the acquisition report, again, these all expand so that you can see where your traffic is coming from. If you have Google Ads running, you can link your Google Ads into your Google Ads account. You can, if you're doing SEO, you can link your Google Search Console into your Google Ads account so you can see that data here. Your social media, and again, if you're doing campaign tracking, you'll see that under campaigns. Your behavior report, you can look at things like your site content. If you have a site search installed on your site, you can add that as well. And you'll be able to see what people are searching within your site. And then the conversion report, you'll be able to see the goals that people are completing. So the funnel visualization report is that step, for example, this step right here. If you add this, you'll be able to see that within the funnel visualization report. And then the e-commerce report is if you have e-commerce set up on your site, you will be able to see that as well. Okay, I'm gonna go over bounce rate, so just give me a second. Okay, so questions that Google Analytics answers. So one of the common questions is really, what is the age or gender of my website visitors, right? And this is important to know because you want to know if this aligns with with your target audience, the people that you're trying to reach. This can also be helpful for you to better understand who you would like to target as well. So to access this report when Google Analytics, you will need to go into audience and then click on demographics, and then you'll be able to access age and gender. Now, this is one of the things that you need to configure, otherwise you would not have access to this. So you need to configure this in your property settings, in your admin panel, and you need to enable demographics and interest data in order for you to access this report. Otherwise, for example, if you already have Google Analytics set up and this is not enabled, you're not going to be seeing this report. So that's why I said there's a lot of different integrations you need to do in order for you to get some of the reports that are available into Google Analytics. Okay. The next thing is, what browsers are visitors using to visit my site? Now, this is really, really important. The reason why this is so important is because if you look here, again, you will see like people who are, you notice here that Chrome is getting the most visitors, right? 31,000 visits compared to Safari that's getting 5,962, right? So about 6 times the amount of traffic Chrome is getting, but the revenue that Chrome is generating is a lot less than Safari. So you might want to see like, what is the reason that Safari is driving more conversions than Chrome? It might be that the website have an issue in Chrome, right? The website might not be performing as well in Chrome browser. And you can actually drill down into these individual browsers, and it will tell you the specific versions of browsers. This is, as a web design company, this is something that we do for our clients, right? We do browser compatibility testing, so we can ensure that your website is going to be functioning properly in the different browsers, because that can have a significant impact on your user experience and also your conversion rate. No, there isn't a way to turn on the most used. You have to go in. You have to go in to configure the settings that you want. Is it a better to pay more attention to new users versus users? Well, users is basically everyone who visits your site, and new users are people who are visiting your site for the first time. New users indicate that you're getting new people to your site. Now, it really depends on your business objectives, because if you are a website that relies on repeat visits, like let's say, for example, CNN, for example, right? You want people to come back and read the news. So you want to have a good portion of returning users. But you also, if it's part of your strategy to grow your user base, then you also want to see new users as well. So it really goes back to your business objective. Where are visitors located? So again, you'll be able to see this in your audience report under geo and location. So you can see where people are coming from, the United States, where what countries they're coming from, what language are they using, right? This is important because, again, this goes back to your targeting strategy. And for example, if you're running ads, you can look here and you can say, well, most of the people, most of my revenue is coming from California and New York. So maybe instead of targeting all of the United States, I want to target those specific states. Or you can drill down even further and you can see this on a city level, for example, right? Or metro level. So you can go into these reports to get a better understanding on a more granular level where your visitors are coming from. And not just where your visitors are coming from, but those that are actually making purchases or those that are actually converting based upon the actions that you set up, right? Who are your high value visitors and where are they coming from, right? So opposed to just looking at all your visitors as a whole, you want to look at your high value visitors, those people that are actually converting. Also, what are my top performing channels? So again, this is within the acquisition report, and your channel is basically a high level or category of your website visitors. So you have like organic search, which is people who are finding you via search engines, but then you can dig in and find the specific sources. So Google, Bing, Yahoo, you can dig into these reports and you can see specifically what search engines they're coming from. Direct traffic, people who came directly to your website. Again, this direct traffic can sometimes be incorrect because if you're not properly targeting your email traffic, it's all going to go into direct. Referral traffic means what sites are sending traffic to you. So if you're advertising on a specific website, you want to be looking at your referral traffic to see, well, how much traffic am I getting from that site I'm advertising on? And specifically, is that traffic driving conversions for me, right? Whatever those conversions may be. Social traffic, you have to tag that also. Affiliate traffic, if you have affiliates that you pay a commission, you want this other traffic to be as little as possible. If you're targeting your website campaigns, your marketing campaigns, if you're targeting them properly, your other buckets shouldn't be as high. Paid search, so again, this is if you're doing Google ads or Facebook ads or any type of ads, it goes into the paid search bucket. And then display is if you're doing things like banner ads, right? But again, once you go into these, you can drill down into the specific source, which is the specific platforms like Facebook, like Google ads, like Twitter, Pinterest, for example. What keywords are driving website traffic? So you can see here, if you have your Google Analytics account connected to the Google Search Console, Google, again, they eliminated this query data in Google Analytics, but there's a way for you to get it if you connect it to Google Search Console. So it will let you know specifically what keywords people are typing into your site that's actually driving traffic to your site. Now, you want to make sure that, okay, based upon my SEO strategy, are those keywords actually working for me? Are they driving traffic for me? And again, what are the most visited pages on your site? So you find out within the behavior report, site content, all pages tell you what are the most popular pages on your site. And that is sorted by page views, right? The amount of page views. And page views are basically the total number of pages that your users viewed on your site. Unique page views are an average of how many pages per session that people view. And then what you want to look at here is bounce rate. So bounce rate is basically if someone comes to your site and they don't visit any other pages on your site, you want to, that is considered a bounce rate. Now, it's important for you to look at your bounce rate on an individual page basis. An average bounce rate is around 55%. If you're seeing that your bounce rate is over 55%, that is a cause for concern. It might indicate that one, that page might be taking too long to load, or the page is not loading properly. So you can, when you see that you have a high bounce rate, you can just click into that specific page and you can review that page to see if there's a specific issue that that page might be having to determine why is the bounce rate so high on that page. What traffic sources are driving conversion? So this is really important because if you're running different marketing campaigns or you're advertising via different channels, you want to know which channel, which medium or source is actually driving conversion. So again, you want to look at this on an action basis because conversions take in all the goals that you've set. But if you look at it on an individual basis, like purchases completed, we can see here that most of the completions, most of the purchases completed is coming from Google organic, which means it's coming from SEO. As you can see here, referral traffic. And the reason why it says google.com referrals, you can actually add this so it does not show up as a referral because Google traffic shouldn't really show up as referral. You can add it into your Google Analytics. So, and again, here you see you have direct traffic is driving 12 conversions. So let's say that you were doing some ads on Facebook, for example, and you notice here, it's Facebook ads are not driving purchases. So that means you need to really reevaluate your Facebook ad strategy, and maybe you might want to shift budget from Facebook ads to Google SEO, for example, right? Again, this is just an example based upon this specific website, which is the Google Merchandise Store. But this is how you can utilize some of this data. And you can also look at the overall conversion rate for your website, right? Now, this goal conversion rate, it takes in the average of all your website conversions. You don't want to look just at the average. You want to look at the conversions on an individual basis based upon what goals you have set. You can see that on an individual basis as well. So let me check here. Yeah, so Google Analytics track people based the data that they get for age and gender and things like that. That is inferred data based upon if you have a Gmail account and you're logged in when you're using your Gmail account, data from other third parties, Google partners, for example, based upon your browsing history, if you're browsing a certain type of site. No, with Google Analytics, there's the traffic channels, a lot of them are already in Google Analytics by default. But for example, for example, email is one of the channels that's not set up by default. So you need to tag that traffic so that you'll be able to add email as a channel. So really, you do need to have a good sampling of data. I would say 3 months of data at least for you to be able to start making good analysis. And so Google, Murad, our CEO, wanted to remind you that we'll be teaching email marketing on April 16. And tomorrow we also have an SEO class. And we also offer paid full day training that are very hands-on, where you can learn all of this and more. We go very in depth and go into the detailed reports in Google Analytics, and you get the questions answered to your specific business or situation. These are paid classes as well. You can also do a certificate where you get a digital marketing certificate if you choose to do all of them. Okay, so we have come to the end of our webinar. We went slightly over. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We encourage you to stay safe, and thanks for your feedback.